I want to welcome our live audience. Little by little, we're getting back to live, little by little. So thank you all for being here. You all know I'm Bob Ost. I'm the executive director and co-founder with Cheryl Davis and Gary Hughes, who's back there, of Theater Resources Unlimited. We've been wanting to do this. Admittedly, I feel like we're maybe a little late to the table because we've been going through this period of awareness for almost 3 years now. And it predates COVID as well, but it became a little bit more obvious and apparent and hard to not look at during COVID, and because of things that were happening during COVID, and also for the fact that we were all having a lot of time to sit and reflect. And sometimes I think that was God's point. I think this whole thing came to be because we were in a situation, whether we knew it or not, where we had to sit down and think long and hard about who we are and who we want to be in this country and in this community and in the world. So Janel, who's coming with us virtually, and Cheryl, who's here with me now, and Scott Sickles had taken on the task of making TRU conscious, aware, and active in terms of dealing with issues that are going on in our country right now. We're not starting this tonight with answers. We have observations about things that are going on and what needs to happen. We want to hear from you. That's why we want you in the room and you virtually to participate in this conversation. We want to know what you care about, as well as what my co-hosts and I think and care about. So let's make this a conversation. What we're going to do now, should we have everybody? We'll have everybody except my co-hosts, Janel, Tara, and Ron. If you could turn your cameras off, that would be good. It helps us focus on the three co-hosts. I call people co-hosts tonight instead of speakers because I want them to be welcoming your participation in the same way that I'm hoping to have your participation. I want this to be a conversation. That said, I'm sure that my co-hosts have things that they would like to express and say about why we're here and why we're talking about what we're talking about. I want to start off actually by introducing my co-founder of TRU and one of my dearest friends in the world, Cheryl Davis. So Cheryl, tell us a little bit about yourself and why you and Janel, you can jump in on this too while she's talking about it, why you and Janel decided that you wanted to use a town hall format and have conversations in whatever ways we could start exploring the issues that need to be explored right now in terms of creating greater diversity and greater opportunities for BIPOC artists.
So to nibble away at that topic, I'm Cheryl Davis. I'm Vice President, co-founder of TRU. By day, I'm a mild-mannered Midtown Manhattan attorney. By night, I'm a playwright, librettist, lyricist, TV writer.
I don't think you're as mild-mannered as you used to be.
But it's still alliterative.
Okay.
But so, and in my copious free time, I write. And one of the things that we wanted to make available is, and I also belong to some other groups. And one thing that happened early on in the pandemic was another group I belonged to was trying to reach out to playwrights of color. And they said, oh, we have this great stuff we want to do and this, that, and the other thing. And then another playwright of color stated, like, well, why don't you ask us what we want you to do and provide for us? And that was just mind-blowing to me. Is that we can have a part in deciding what we want and what we can ask for. Wow. So that's why I felt, So I felt like a town hall sort of set up to ask, like, rather than us saying, well, this is what we can do. What is it people need? What is it people want? What are people feeling? And that's one of the things we wanted to try to elicit here. And that's the best way we can figure out how can we help each other and how can TRU help you?
Thanks, Cheryl.
Janelle, you want to say?
Janelle, would you like to add to that?
Sure, Cheryl, I totally agree exactly with what you said. I'm Janel Scarborough, producer, script developer, TRU board, and along with Cheryl and Scott, just really want to welcome everyone to this conversation. I think it's a really important conversation, and just to have a safe place to just air these things where we're in a really interesting time right now. And, you know, there were a lot of promises made. And so it's just this sort of just a check-in of accountability of where are we right now and what are the things that we still need to kind of keep the momentum about. So we wanted to open the conversation and just thank you all for taking the time to engage.
Thanks, Janelle. And if you hit hide non-video participants, you can't do it. You can't find it. Okay, never mind. So let's move on to let's start with our virtual participants. So Tara, haven't seen you in about a year. It was very exciting meeting you last and very illuminating meeting you last year. So
yeah, it was lovely.
So welcome. Tell us what you a little bit about yourself, so everybody knows. I know who you are, but other people may not. And also tell us what you think is important, and why it's important to have these conversations.
Yeah, absolutely. So Histre Estongo Tercho Tefkados. So hello everyone, Tara Moses, she, her pronouns. I am a citizen of the Seminole Nation of Oklahoma, and I'm also Muskogee Creek. And I'm calling in from Ohlone lands, so also the Bay Area, out here in Oakland. Anyway, I have a play that's closing that I directed this weekend, that I loaned some stuff for the show. So I'm here to pick it up. Anyway, and then head back to Narragansett Land, which is Rhode Island, where I tend to reside these days. I'm a director, I'm a playwright. I'm also the artistic director of Red Eagle Soaring, which is a 33-year-old Native youth theater up in Seattle. I'm also the co-founder of Groundwater Arts, and we do decolonization, racial justice, and climate justice for the theater and other arts and cultural fields. Yeah, so a lot of my work is around celebrating Indigenous peoples. It is around uplifting BIPOC. It is around decolonization, and very much through a justice lens. Anyway, and so these kinds of conversations about what do folks need, what are the resources that we can allocate, why, and at the crux of all of these conversations and sort of like the intersection of all of my work too, and why I think it's so important is really understanding how settler colonialism is present in the theater, in our practices, both knowingly and unknowingly, because, you know, the reason why we keep having these conversations, you know, the reason why we have all of these reckonings one after another anyway, is because we're not getting to the true root of the issue, which is colonialism and white supremacy and how it manifests in our work. Anyway, so I'm here to, you know, keep it real, say it how it is. I'm really excited to have these conversations with this like wonderful group of folks. So that's all for me for now. I'll be back with more hot takes.
Oh, I know you will. I know you will. Ron Simons, I am so thrilled that you were able to make it tonight, Ron. And you can turn on your mic and say hi to everybody and tell us a little bit about yourself.
Hello, everyone. My name is Ron Simons. I'm an actor producer, and I'm the founder of SimonSays Entertainment, whose mission is to tell every story, the story of underrepresented communities. And
just so people know a little bit about you, you are one of the most active Black producers in commercial theater today. You're like one of maybe 7 or 8. And I think that that's an important context for everybody to understand. One of the things that we can't help but noticing is that there's not enough representation of BIPOC producers in our business. I think that's a big failing right now for us. And also we had a season where you had 2 pieces. Tell us a little bit about the 2 pieces that you had in this last Broadway season.
Well, I had the crossover of what was left over of Ain't Too Proud, The Life and Times of the Temptations, which was running, excuse me, at the Imperial Theater. And then I started doing my first lead producing work with Thoughts of a Colored Man, and then followed by For Colored Girls Who Considered Suicide When the Rainbow Is Enough. And I just closed my Death of a Salesman with Wendell Pierce, and about to open New York, New York.
All right.
You are a little bit busy, aren't you?
Mhm.
And you've been for us. I'm really honored. I really am. One of the things that we're going to get to during the course of the evening, not necessarily now, is what was the significance of this past Broadway season that seemed to put some degree of emphasis on BIPOC work, writers, producers, and what the next steps might be for that. I think, let's see, who I got. Janelle, I got you, so it's time for Malini.
I'm up. Hi, I'm Malini Singh McDonald. I am the founder of Theater Beyond Broadway, which is a platform that fosters and promotes the independent artist. And I'm also the executive director of Black Henna Productions that I founded with my husband, which is a company in the style of Shakespeare's company, allowing all artists to be able to do exactly whatever they want. You know, we don't tell them what to do. You know, bring your art to the table. I am also a member of the League of Professional Theater Women. After 25 years of knowing Bob, I have finally become a member of TRU. And I got fucked in. Last panel, here I am. When I'm not producing, and I do have two projects that I am working on. One is a DNA play about the epigenetics and pathology of talking about colonialism, very much as a part of this story in our DNA and our ancestry for women who are just talking about that exploration and hitting the proverbial ceiling in some instances, and in others, not so much. And another one called Lonely Moon, which is a musical that's almost done being written. In my other life, I'm also the Deputy Chief Diversity Officer for a state agency. And so as far as, you know, the conversation, I've been having this conversation for like decades. Like I've been talking about this and nobody was listening. So for me, I'm like, wasn't surprised when the curtain, you know, got ripped off, and like all of a sudden, like, oh, this, I was like, well, yeah, like I've known this, I've seen this, and I know this through my own experience of not being able to break through to the other side and having to find the ways around in order to really understand how this very bizarre industry that I'm so impassioned about also makes me miserable, but I'm here to do the deed. Ariel, you're up.
Oh boy.
Ariel Estrada.
Hi. No, I'm laughing at them making you miserable part. It loves to hate us, doesn't it? Yeah. Hi, I'm Ariel Estrada. I'm an actor and a producer and an educator. I am right now the associate director of the theater program at Fordham University. And I'm also juggling that with an acting career and doing all the stuff on the arts administration side as well, which is why I'm late.
Your
I just
favorite
turned in
part.
the NEA.
That's your favorite part, right?
I've been running the NEA for hours over the last couple of weeks. Oops. That was weird. It just happened. Is somebody? Oh.
Probably be muted.
Yep.
I was trying to select the gear.
Yeah.
Oh.
I turned it off.
Cool doors. Yeah, and prior to my work at Fordham, I was most recently at Actors Equity Association as the diversity and inclusion coordinator there as a part of a two-person team handling all the DEI initiatives for a 58K.
Is equity all diverse now?
There's this bridge over in, yeah, no, it's so not. And I sure have a lot of ideas about how to do things better for folks, but I'm sure we'll get to that when we get to your question.
Would love to hear those ideas. Tara, did you mention Broadway for Racial Justice? I can't remember whether you, because people should know about it.
Yeah, no, I did not. I'm on the advisory board for Broadway for Racial Justice as well. So I'm everywhere.
Okay. So I was, in addition to introducing yourselves, I was hoping that you might also make a statement of some sort that would initiate a conversation. I'm also open to any questions or conversation from the room even now. So let's just start talking, everyone.
Bob, is this being recorded?
Yes, it is.
I just want to say something. You know, as artists of color, we have been creating our work. The work is being created. The community knows. We haven't been doing this in a vacuum. It's just a matter of those who all of a sudden are now interested in the work that we're doing. That's for me where I get like, you know, the fire burns, because I'm like, okay, but we're here. We've been having the conversation. It's just that segments of the population have not been listening. And if anything, when they were listening, they were basically patting us on our head and pushing us backstage. So I am not so much interested in rehashing the same conversation, but wanting to just say, so when are you just going to open the door for us? When are you going to give us that slot? Thank goodness, you know, Ron has had the opportunity to produce a few shows on Broadway, and you know, that's opening the door for us who've been trying for so long to be able to get a commercial product going. But he's one of, you said it, one of seven. I read the back of the playbills. I know who's producing.
Ron, is it more than 7 now? Do I have old information? I think it was 7 for a while.
In terms of Broadway shows, I think I'm on number 13.
I mean,
We're up to
that's
13? Okay.
Is that the question?
So Ron, to address what Malini's saying, what do you think was the significance of this past Broadway season that seemed to offer so many opportunities to artists of color and to audiences to be more aware of greater diversity? Did it make an inroad at all? Did it help? Is it a step forward?
Yes, I think that it was a major step forward. Never in the history of Broadway has there been a season where 7 Black playwrights had their shows produced on Broadway. Never has there been a time on Broadway where all the new plays that opened on Broadway were by Black playwrights. There have been so many other groundbreaking things and history-making things that happened in the last season, even like Thoughts of a Colored Man. It was the first Broadway show that had a Black writer, a Black director, Black producer, all Black cast, Black assistant director. So those of us who really care about diversity are pushing very hard to get people of color out in the front lines and to get them their chance in the sun for Broadway. So it was amazing. However, the question for me is it a flash in the pan? Because one season is great. I want to know in 3 years, in 5 years, in 10 years, you know, what the look and complexion of the Great White Way is. Because it's easy to swing the pendulum from 9 o'clock to 3 o'clock, but no one, including me, I don't think expects every new play on Broadway to be by Black directors and Black writers, I mean. So the question is, how far will it swing back? Will it swing back to 4 o'clock, 5 o'clock? I'll do it 6 o'clock at this point, because there were so few people, so few stories on Broadway, particularly, as you noted, producers, which is why I am mentoring so many, particularly Black women producers, to become Broadway producers, because we need to, the Great White Way needs to be a little more like beige at this point. So, what I love doing as part of my producing work is giving people who are not just producers, but others, the opportunity to make their bow on Broadway. Camille A. Brown, who's a phenomenal choreographer, made her Broadway debut as a director, right, on Broadway. In fact, she was the director and choreographer for Colored Girls. Stephen Bronax had never directed on Broadway. He had his day in the sun, and will be having more coming. And a number of men in Thoughts of a Colored Man made their Broadway debut. So I'm looking at how everyone in this room and beyond, can focus on bringing more color, more diversity to every aspect of Broadway. For me, I focused on producing because producers are the first gatekeepers to what's happening on Broadway. We're the people who find the theater, the shows. We're the people who fund the shows. We're the people who develop the shows. So we are those people who put it in front of the theater owner. Now, the theater owner is the final judge of who gets a theater. And in this past season, there was, because of what happened in our world today with George Floyd and, Black Lives Matter and the anti-racial movement that was going on, a perfect storm happened because people were at home during the COVID. And so they had more opportunity to listen and pay attention. And that's when a lot of people realized for the first time that, oh, they're killing Black men. Like, just every now and again, they're killing Black men. This is not the first time. So this was a revelation to some people, which is why they took to the streets, which is great. And I'm really happy about that. But again, what I want to see is how we as a community continue to bring greater possibilities for people of color in every aspect of our business. Particularly what I want to see is in the advertising companies, the marketing companies, the companies who come in as a team and decide what the advertising strategy will be, where the ads will show up, what does the key art look like. For about 8 years there, I was the only Black person in the room, of anybody in the room. Like, there was nobody else in any other part of the storytelling organization for companies. Now, there are more of us coming in. And I think I was just talking to someone in politics here for the city, because I'm supposed to be meeting with the speaker. And what I want to tell her is Black producers in particular need more help sustaining, because Black producers, I did not realize that for you to get a play up on Broadway, you got to have maybe $250,000, $300,000 of money set aside so that you can do workshops, so that you can pay people to do, rent space. It's a very expensive venture. And if you don't have a Rolodex where you can call up people and say, hey, I need 50K here, 100K there, and they know you well enough to say, sight unseen, I believe in you, I'm going to give you this money. We need support, because if we don't have support, the moment we start producing, the clock is ticking. There's no way we can sustain, and there's no way we can even begin unless we have some support of either the community, the theater community, or of patrons or the city government. So that's the way I look at the world in terms of right now. I just want us to keep the trend going of more people being represented across all racial and diverse spectrum.
Thanks, Ron. Tara, I'm going to turn to you because I know that you have frustrations. You've talked about that last year when you were on with us. So do you want to just say a few words about your frustrations and what you'd like to see happen?
Yeah, sure. I mean, it's very silly because I was like, what am I not mad about, right? There's so many things to be mad about. But I think, right now, today, February 21st, Tara, has a lot of frustrations around these conversations. And we talk about like, oh, yes, we want to do all of this access for, BIPOC, BIPOC this, BIPOC that. And then I'm always curious about where's the I. That still is a problem, the number of theaters I see in their seasons, and they're like, we're celebrating BIPOC artists, and there's not a single Native artist anywhere, is a problem because the acronym's incorrect. Let's be straight up. And then even looking at commercial theater, I'm waiting for the day where finally like Native stories are being seen. Like right now in rehearsals is Thanksgiving play by Larissa Fasthorse. Yes, hooray, love it. She'll be the first Native woman to be produced on Broadway that we know of. Like, we love to see it. However, the Thanksgiving play is a cast of all white people being directed by a white woman. There are no Natives on the design team. There's a Native associate director, great. That's it. And so while I'm holding like, hooray, we love to see this progress, two things can be true. Yes, we're creating access for two Native artists commercially. When is the time we're going to see the Native play on stage, on these commercial stages, with full Native casts? That's what I'm ready to see. When are we going to see Native directors helming these commercial productions? That's what I want to see. You know, when are we going to see these Native designers who've been working for 20 plus years all over the National Theater? When are they going to be designing on Broadway? These are sort of the frustrations that I currently hold, in that, like, you know, we're talking about the progress that's been done, and like, absolutely, let's keep going. You know, I'm with Ron. I'm like, what's it going to look like in a couple seasons? All right. I was like, you know, because I'm also sitting here and I see, you know, we all saw Hamilton, you know, win all the awards, hooray, hurrah. And then the next year it goes to Dear Evan Hansen. Like, I got some questions about that. Anyway, and so there's a sort of like the frustrations that I'm holding is like, number one, let's say what we mean, and mean what we say, because in all of these celebrations, you know, as a Native artist, I can't help being like, well, I'm still over here on the margins. Like, I'm here to absolutely support for all of my, like, as the best ally as I can be to all these communities of color. But stop trying to put me in there of like, look at all the progress we're doing for you when there hasn't been any. Number one. And then number two, I'm excited and ready for the time when the commercial theater decides to actually invest in Native artists in all areas of the theater. But like, can we just start with a Native play with Native people in it? Like, let's just start there. Like, is that too much to ask? So that's sort of what I'm holding at this particular day.
I thank you so much for sharing that. I thought that would be a worthwhile time spent for us all. Ariel, well, you have a different perspective.
No, no, actually, they brought up, both of them brought up basically some solutions already, and it's more of a review, because hopefully you've all been sitting in these rooms for the last two Zooms or Zoom rooms for the last 2 years, 3 years, talking about this stuff, right? And just to remind folks that the biggest thing you can do to help, if you are a white theater practitioner, is to share your power and to be conscious of the power that you have, right? We rarely have it in those rooms, right? And that is certainly one of the things we can do to help ourselves, right? And it's one of the reasons, you know, that I do not just acting, right? Because I mean, as wonderful as it is, right? But I also knew that I needed to be in multiple places at once to be able to move the needle forward. And unfortunately, as the sector changes dramatically over the next 5 to 10 years, I don't think it's a secret to anybody that the regional system is collapsing in on itself. And we're not going to see regional theater in the current configuration the way it is in the next 3 years even. We're going to see like a dramatic drop off, right? And we're even talking about that in education at the moment. How are we going to train theater majors for a nearly non-existent sector?
Are you saying that the not-for-profit regional theater?
Yeah,
they're closing?
We're going to start seeing them die like flies soon, because it's just between rightly us people getting paid more, which is absolutely part of all the movement that we did, all right, that people need to make a living wage, right? But that combined with rising costs and climate change, like everything's moving, like everything's going to start to move away from the coasts, right? It's just too expensive to do regional theater unless you have an enormous endowment. And even then, the people, like the theaters that are surviving, are starting to eke into their endowments, because we're having a hard time getting people to get back to the theater, right? And you know, and then we're also seeing on Broadway, right? It's going right back to $1,000 seats, and it's completely inaccessible. So, you know, despite having more shows on Broadway with voices of color on it, awesome. But how many of us actually get to see it? I don't make that kind of money. Most of us probably don't, right? So, again, share power, right? Know that you've got that you're going to have to spread it around, right? And make that conscious decision to spread it around. And in terms of seeing ourselves more on stage, you know, one of one of the wonderful things that I loved about this past Broadway season is that it finally acknowledged that race does matter, right? Because so much of white ideas of what being good to us BIPOC folks, right, quote unquote, is, oh, we don't see color, which of course is the most offensive thing you can say to any of us. Yeah, exactly. Right. And, because race, of course, does matter, because it certainly matters to any of us who are getting beat up in the streets all the time. So, yeah.
I want to bring up the ugly truth that there's been a lot of antagonism and violence against the Asian population.
Oh, it's always been happening.
Yeah.
Well,
It's not like it just made the news.
It has made.
Yeah, it's not new. It's happened to us all the time, right? And certainly everything of course, everything happening to the Black community, everything, historically, everything that's happened to the Indigenous communities, right? And that's the other thing I think as BIPOC practitioners too, that we can start doing is, and this is just for me, but I know that one of the things that I'm looking at my own work as a producer and very small downtown weirdo stuff that I do is to make as many intersections as I possibly can, right? And that it's, I'm producing a project right now, and unfortunately we couldn't find anybody who was available, but we have guest narrators in the project, and so we need some, and made sure that we tried to get representation from everybody. We couldn't find the Indigenous one because everyone was busy.
Ask Tara. Ask Tara
good
next
problem.
time.
Yeah, and it was, but making that conscious decision to say that if we all don't make it, none of us make it, right? So.
How do you feel that the Asian, there were statistics that said that in the commercial Broadway world, the Asian population was the least represented. That used to be about.
No, that's not true. It's the Indigenous and then followed by Mina.
Okay.
Mina is least actually, and then is it somewhere in there? We'd have to look at the APEC. It's there somewhere around the same.
Is there
But
representation?
we're next. Asians are 2% on Broadway last season.
That's what I thought.
Yeah, a little bit more K-pop, but
I was about to,
yeah.
K-pop brought up the percentage.
Yeah, and then Here Lies Love will bring it up again, but probably just up to 6%. Now that is just to compare that to what New York actually looks like. I've done a lot of work in the past. I'm not doing it this year. Just go to
Well,
town.
I
But I do a lot of work with a group called 18% and Growing, right? And we lobby for city funding for the API communities because we're the fastest growing poverty level in New York, and we're the fastest growing minority group or marginalized peoples group in New York, and we get 6% of the funding, right? And on Broadway, we get 2% of the funding, so 2 to 6% at any given time, and that doesn't really reflect who we are.
Are there enough Asian producers?
I can name 4.
So how do we address that? How do we get more people from the community to produce things that they care about?
Well, give us more money.
Yeah.
Give us more money. Again, this is a systemic thing, right? We don't have, we talk about it all the time at school, at Fordham, right? We're trying to get more BIPOC Alana artists in training, right? But then they came from high schools that are typically do not get a lot of arts funding because they came from lower funded schools that were not in white affluent areas, right? And it just becomes this sort of tumbling of that, which means again, going back to sharing power and being very conscious about that. Whenever I walk into a room, I'm like, okay, what are the power dynamics of this room? Because just because I'm a relatively brown man, right, doesn't mean the second word there is important. I also am a man, right? So, or a cisgendered man. So I know I walk into a room, and because I have power in some ways and do not have power in other ways, and those fluctuate depending on who is in the room, right? And if you can pretty much assume that if you are in a theater room and you're white, and especially if you're a heterosexual male, you're probably going to be in top. So you better start sharing that power.
Why,
Right.
why be better?
Why would it be better?
Why
Should they?
does
Because,
that person think they have better?
good question. They don't, right? I mean, do they usually? We don't do it unless we nudge
Transform
them.
power recognizes not what power.
Yep, and they don't give it up. They don't give it up.
So why would they and why should they? I
Right.
think the conversation is way up here on Broadway.
I see Ron's with you.
The conversation is way up here on Broadway. I'm thinking, should we just focus on the pipeline? Like, where's the pipeline? Okay, so a lot of schools don't have programs. What do we need to create programs? Because Broadway needs material too. I mean, it's got to be a multifaceted sort of approach. And I know your organization has been doing a lot of things, but when you talk about going into a room and, you know, the power dynamic, we're sort of eating each other up in a lot of ways. You know, during COVID, I took a writing course, and I'll be quick. And so you think of that as a safe space, a space with other artists for you. Okay, I'm safe, I can, you know, of course I was the only Black person in the room. And it was Zoom. And, you know, you talk a lot about microaggressions, things that really discourage people and make them go away. And so there was a gay man who was on Zoom, married to another man. I'm like, yeah, okay, my people. And in his monologue, he used the N-word.
Oh.
Yeah. So, you know, the air was still, and then it becomes my job to compose myself and do all these mental calculations so that people don't say, well, you know, they don't know how to behave. And to stop it. And I'm like, there's so many problems here. The first problem is the moderator didn't stop you and say, hey, we got to get back to you later. So, and I hear there's so much about Broadway artists, you know, the microaggressions from stage managers, from different people. And so what I think is that we need to start with what we can do. What can we do to create programs for young people, for old people? I have three plays. I was lucky enough to have the money to produce them at Theater 54 and what was that theater on 39th. Those places don't exist.
No, they
anymore.
don't. Oh, they're all gone.
They're
All are Black.
gone. So I think we need to focus on a little bit lower.
Janelle, I'd like you to come in and chime in on some of this conversation. What things are striking you as being
So
needed?
I would definitely like to echo my fellow panelists of, look, we've been here for years. You know, this is not a new thing to us who have been in the space. And so I would like to talk about the investment in diversity and how important that is. And sometimes we have this concept of thinking, waiting for someone else to be the solution. And I would just speak for my own. I got into producing based on the fact that I was developing scripts with writers, and I saw a need for wanting these pieces to go the distance. And so I, you know, took sort of my day job and made that lucrative enough so that I could fund the thing that my heart really is passionate about. And so we have to ask ourselves as artists, especially as artists of color, we are so creative as people. And so how do we sort of tap into our own networks and figure out, okay, you know, I have maybe 10 people who are passionate about this thing that I'm doing. Maybe they have resources that, if it's not financial or conversations that I can link into, that will become resources. And I just think now that sort of this window has been opened commercially on the bigger level, I think we need to sort of understand on the grassroots level how do we get to a point of not waiting for this other sort of unattainable thing that may be for a lot of us? And how do we start to produce on that level and start to kind of collaborate to make these projects get to, you know, the next stage and the next stage and the next stage, so that we have the pipeline to get to Ron, basically.
So right.
I'd like to also add that, you know, I will speak for our people, the Asian community, that you look at Broadway, the Broadway formula, and how many shows recoup. So it is not. Ron, I hope your shows recoup.
It's
I
1 out
know
of
it is.
8.
But I think there's also that which is, you know, coming from immigrant parents and growing up in this country, and you know, that is not a lucrative place to put the money, right? That is not where they're going to invest their money. But I agree with Janelle and what Ariel was saying as far as getting together as a coalition. Yes, let's go down a level, because Broadway is not Olympus, right? I mean, not everybody's going to get to that point. Some of us have had the opportunity to dip our feet there, but it isn't this one level lower where we need to, maybe it's another, let's create another coalition. There's so many coalitions, but like something where we can get that pipeline, because I mean, I don't have a Rolodex where somebody can give me $300,000 to start. I have to fundraise hardcore in order to just like come up with the minimum. And then I could worry about the maximum, right? This is the minimum budget I need to pay my actors, my staff, and get this show going, and pray for the maximum. And again, also the information that on how to do this is not, well, now it is, but was not accessible. It wasn't until I took the producers intensive at CTI with those seminars, and I was like, I'm just going to spend the money to meet with a Broadway producer, get into the League of Professional Theater Women to network, was when I was able to go, oh, there's like a whole thing. I didn't understand it, but if you're not privy to it, how would you ever know? You're just in this, this constant loop of thinking you're failing, but you're not failing. You just don't have the information. That's right. So, okay, I'm done ranting.
Well,
Hey, Bob, we have a question from Judith.
Judith?
Yeah, it's kind of complicated because I've been thinking about it in terms of gender, all from like playwrights through stage managers, designers, etc., which are covers, how to get from the data to having success in actually getting people hired. One of the things I had suggested quite a while ago, and somebody poo-pooed it, was somebody labeled it One More Conversation, which turned out to be, what is that thing, the football thing, the Rooney Rule. But having people who work for these, like the off-Broadway companies, and they do quite a bit of work, or the LORT theaters, etc., or places like the Roundabout and MTC, etc., going to the general manager, or they establish a relationship because they work at those theaters, and say, listen, how about talking, going to see, I saw this play, and there were some very good designs. It was very small budget, but they did a beautiful job. You go and look and see, and if you like it, recommend that person to come in and speak to you. So that was like a low level thing. But also Lucy Kerber at the Tonic Theatre in London, what she did was it was about gender, because this was back when that was the whole, what you really heard a lot in general public. She had worked at a lot of the theaters around London, and she got them all together, and they met once a week once a month, Lucy became a facilitator, and she got all these theaters, including the National, the RSC, Bicycle, Donmar, all levels of budget. And they each theater in its own way promised they were going to swore that they were going to do something to get women, mentor women, bring them in, give them opportunities, mentor them, etc. And it seemed to be a good success. I just wonder if what you all think of the idea of having, these theaters do something on a similar basis. And also my only,
if you're going to ask a question to everybody, I think you need to sort of put this into like 2 or 3 sentences. So, because there's a whole lot of stuff that you just brought up, and I don't think we can respond to all of it. But we can respond.
Does anybody have an opinion about any of that?
Like around mentorship? Was that the main question? I want to just be sure.
It's just how you get people hired, in the various the non-white male cis, category, everybody else. Is it going to overwhelm people to ask, to sit down with them and get people to hire and look at this is the pipeline we're talking about here. I'm talking about going from regional to smaller theaters to Broadway.
I don't think there's a generic answer to this. I mean, I think it goes back to what Ariel was saying, which is that you have to recognize who the people of power with the power are, and you have to somehow or other engage them in going along with what you want to do. Yes, I can always ask. I see people all the time whose work I love. I can always suggest it to somebody that they should look at those people. Sometimes they listen to me, sometimes they don't.
I'm thinking about, it is the employers, getting to the employers. How do you get to the employers, not overwhelm them with, so many people are trying, BIPOC is trying to get in there. And how do you not overwhelm them?
First, I think we moved the word overwhelm.
I guess it's something to think about.
Can I say something just to, if I think I understand what's being said? Let's be very clear about this. It is all about money. And if you think that Broadway is about art and it's about beauty and it's about inspiration, that is not what Broadway is about. Broadway is about money, which is ironic because only 20% of Broadway shows recoup. The vast majority of those shows do not recoup, but everyone's looking for the next Hamilton. So if change is going to happen, people aren't just going to, in general, give their power or share their power with other people. They have to be compelled to do so. Here's one of the things that I'm trying to do, and I think other people are doing it as well. Broadway has been this entity that has catered to white women between 50 and 70 for decades. They are the people who buy the tickets first. They're the people who buy the tickets so that the show even stays open until the summertime when the tourists may be coming into town. Well, those women are dying dead, or they're not coming out to theater much anymore. They're afraid of getting COVID, except to go see Music Man. If you see Music Man, it is a sea of blue hair. Absolutely sea of blue hairs. So at the end of the day, audience has to be diverse, because I've been in these rooms like the Broadway League for years, and the question is, how do we get more people? How do we get more Black people in, Latino, Asian, Native Americans? Why? How come they're not coming to the theater? How do we get? Well, first of all, why don't you tell their stories? So if you tell their stories, then you have at least a shot at getting them to come see, because this idea, in my humble opinion, present company accepted, I don't think it's a matter of economics that people necessarily can't afford to come see, because a lot of white producers will say, well, Black people really can't afford to see Broadway tickets. And I want to say to them, do you know how much tickets to Beyonce cost? She's $400 each. So if they can find the money to spend $400 on Beyonce because they want to see it, they can spend $125 to find something if they're interested, if they're invited. Because if you want them to come, you have to invite them. You can't just throw a party and then expect people to show up if you didn't invite anybody. You have to invite the people. So all of this is to say that there's a push now because of the core audience of buying tickets is shifting and changing. The economics will make producers and in some cases theater owners look at what is actually they are presenting and who can they bring in their audience. What we really need are younger people, right? Broadway is dying. We need young people, but to get young people in the theater, we have to do something that attracts them because they have so many options. They can watch YouTube. They're watching. You know, they can go to concerts. Everybody has endless amounts of choices. So you have to have a compelling reason for those people to come. So the fact that money is not being made because the people who normally buy the tickets aren't coming anymore means you got to change the strategy. And if you're not changing the strategy, you're going to find yourself ass out because you're going to open shows and they're going to close, right? When I did Thoughts of a Colored Man, something happened that I'd never seen before anywhere on Broadway. I would go to the lip of the stage and I would look up and out. And any given night, 75 to 95% of the faces I saw were African Americans. I defy you to find one other show, and even those that included P. Diddy, where there was that kind of diversity. And the reason why they were there is because they were invited. They saw that there was something in that story for them. And I know I'm getting a little preachy, so I need to back up, but I just want to say that this business is run on money. It's not show art. It's show business. So don't delude yourself into thinking that people are just going to give away their power. History has shown us that the power, people don't just give it away. They have to be compelled to give it away or to share it. All right.
May I say one thing? I was thinking more in terms of who does the work once the show gets on. I'm more focused on, my background is backstage and design and so forth. And I'm not talking about beauty, I'm talking about getting hired. And that's where I was coming from when I said that. You're absolutely right about the money. But
it's also the same thing. Like it's one of the same thing about hiring. It's about who has the money. When I go into and I'm being pitched by an ad agency, one of the questions I have is, oh, so do you have any Black account managers? Are they going to be on the show? Who are they? What have they done in the past? Because if you don't lean into them so that they know that their customers who are producers, folks like me who pay their bills, they need to feel compelled that, oh, well, you know, they really are starting to ask a lot about Native American. Maybe we should hire a Native American or two or some Asians because, you know, we have lost work, AKA money, because we didn't have the representation that we were required to have or were asked to have. So I think it's, again, about money. That's my opinion.
I think
that
I like it. Hello.
in the corporate area. That is an argument, that's a strategy, that's a tack that is taken. Where if you have a company, if you're a lawyer, if you have a client who says like, I want a Black attorney on this case, they will find that Black attorney and bring them to this situation because they will lose money, because they will lose potential business. But Ron, I also wanted to hop on to something you said earlier about having more BIPOC people involved in various like marketing and advertising, etc. From my own experience, I had a play that was touring the country through Clear Channel, and people in the room were saying like, we don't know how to market to this audience. And then say, well, why don't you consult with people like me who know like what they go to the churches, go to whatever. You have to have people, and if you invite an audience, but you have to know how to invite an audience. You know where to get them, where to send the invitation, how to make them feel welcome when they get there.
Absolutely. Go ahead. I'm sorry. I didn't mean to cut you off, David.
No problem. My thing, the issue that I've had thus far is because, I mean, not to go too deep into the play, but the Black Bullet dichotomy is about a negative energy matrix of dehumanizing the Black family for a free, powerful labor force to build an American dream that does not include us. And that's kind of like why they're killing us. But the whole deal is that it's unconditional love, spiritual alignment, and the law of attraction that will allow us to vibrate outside of that negative energy matrix. So all I'm trying to say is this message that I got you know what I'm saying? It's about unconditional love, and I mean, it's a completely in poetry, it's a choreo poem. But I had so many problems until I got it to the Kennedy Center, because I was having all these problems with these, you know, with different levels of running into these people who couldn't understand a story that was not totally positive, you know, with all aspects of the white culture. That's the problem I was having. Did I just shut it down? I'm sorry.
No.
No, you did not shut it down, Dave. We want to know your experience. We want to hear
That's why
what you have to
that's why
say.
we're here. This is the
No, I
purpose.
think, I'm
In
thinking.
fact, I'm gonna jump on that if that's okay, Ron.
Mhm.
I'm really interested in basically just corroborating what Ron in his experience is seeing, but basically that the system is dead and dying. And it's actually not even sustainable. That's the thing. You know, it was only sustainable for a certain period of time. And it's in transition, and there's multiple tensions, including population demographics, you know, that is going to change profoundly what we're, you know, the spaces that we can be in, because that's just a reality. Is that, and I'm seeing this as a producer in the music business, specifically in Afro beats, where, you know, basically I'm a producer with Afropop worldwide. And we're seeing this in the music business so profoundly, you know, where it's like all these Nigerian Afrobeat artists were performing at the NBA. They're
Hello.
performing at every single cultural, and this is the thing about Black entertainment in general. This has been our trajectory since the beginning, is that we are the ones that are the creators, create the genres, they get hijacked from us, and then we're left out of the picture. So the question for me is that if we are in a transition, clearly globally, that we're in this amazing position where systems are bankrupt. They can no longer sustain themselves. White supremacy is no longer sustainable because people are more educated, right? And there's this sort of disconnect with like, wait a minute, I can't. So what I'm definitely want to share is that this is a beautiful, beautiful time for TRU in particular to reach out to these high net worth individuals who are interested in BIPOC stories, because that is the future. And to corroborate what Ron is saying, that's where the money is. Nobody cares that they're Nigerian artists at the NBA. They don't care. What they care about is that Rima has a song with 250 million hits in 1 week. That's what they care about. So we just need to shift our sort of deficit model, because we're the creators. Black people, brown people, people of color, we create, that's our nature. And so what I'm really hoping that TRU can do is to identify these people, and stick with this narrative, Bob, stick with this. Because the reason why I'm here is because you people are genuine. I could be in other spaces. I refuse to even go near Hollywood or near Broadway because people are so freaking messed up. You know, there's no true art there anymore. So what I'd rather do, I'd rather write my own one-woman show as a ritual drama, take it around the world to play people that really want to hear it. And that's what I do. So I don't have to feel bad about not getting money from this person and that person. It's like, no, I'm doing my thing. And I think we need to encourage other artists and other Black performers to just do your thing. Don't keep asking for people that don't even want to include you. Work it out, make it happen. That's what I say.
Amen.
Education-wise, that's exactly where we're heading, right? We can't, the whole sort of model with sending people to conservatory and to a mill for regional theater and Broadway and off-Broadway, it's going to disappear. It has to. So we have that, funnily enough, is something that like folks of color do very well already.
No, the stories are there. We have the
Oh,
stories.
yeah.
You know, as she said, we create. That's what we do. That's our life's blood.
Mhm.
But just, I need to run out because I have the Amtrak. I just go back and I think about it. No one's fault. Do you remember Civil War Voices?
Yeah, I produced it.
Yes, that's why I'm bringing it up. It was a beautiful play. I was really excited to see it, but it was a little bit like Trump saying there's good people on both sides of Charlottesville. No, there aren't. There aren't. And so I had a story I'd written. It's called 19 Secrets, and it's about the 19 ships Harriet Tubman took down. And it wasn't your grandmother's Harriet Tubman, it was her as a woman and what she gave up to do what she did. Well, I produced it, you know, I had Nate Stampley directed it.
Really?
Really.
Wow.
I mean, God was manna from heaven. God just said, gave me these people, these
Wow.
amazing people. But, you know, I can only do that so many times because I was the producer, the sole producer. Where do you go from there? So where do you go from there, Bob? Do you want to produce 19 Secrets?
I'm too old to produce at this
Yeah,
point.
I mean-
But let me just say,
Yeah.
what, to answer some of what's been said by McQuay and by yourself,
Right.
what we're doing at TRU, and we've been doing for 20 years, is offering opportunities to learn how to navigate the business and how to produce and do all these other things. My frustration is that I don't know whether the BIPOC population trusts us enough yet. We don't see a lot of people come in here. And that's one of the reasons why I wanted to do
But
this
who is us? Because I see a lot of
tonight.
brown people, a lot of black people.
Yes, tonight.
And I think there's a, you know, a coalition that can happen. And I don't think that's so hard.
So I think that this is part of the plan, is to gain the trust of the community, do
Yeah.
things that are specifically geared to the community, and then maybe people will come in
Yeah.
and start using the tools that we give them. Now, there may be other things that we need to do. This is what I know how to do right now. I know how to teach people how to navigate the business and how to be in the business and how to produce.
Because
and how
I'm
to
too
produce
old too.
themselves.
I can only hear so many of these conversations
like,
where it's all over the place.
I'm so
And
old.
there's nothing, you know, substantial that we come out with.
So I'm coming out with the hope that what we are doing so far is useful. And I'm still looking for the way to open the doors and say to the community, we're here for you. And this is one of the ways that we can do it, I think.
That's one of the things that we wanted to be able to do through our diversity program, is to connect with the larger community and say that we are here, we want to be of assistance. Tell us how we can best be of assistance.
The larger which community?
The larger, I'm thinking like the BIPOC theatrical community.
Okay.
Yeah.
I mean, Glenn, you've been part of TRU, and I think that we've served you well, and I think we've given you opportunities, and you've done amazing work and done amazing things. But I don't have enough people who believe we can do that, and I'm trying to get credibility.
Yeah, maybe we start on the ground.
Well, it's been very beneficial for me. I've got a chance to do some things that I wanted to do that would not have been able to, like our voice, or two voices. And
Well, True Speak, yeah.
thank you. I guess somebody-
True Voices, True Speak, yeah.
Like just doing that, I always thought that I was more of a filmmaker, but I just never had the opportunity to make films. And so doing this the short plays gave me an opportunity to write film.
Right.
And so now we have one that's in a few festivals, you know, but so.
Just
So
so you.
that's coming from you guys, and that was an opportunity that I would never had without. So
Obstacle.
I appreciate that.
I want to brag.
No,
Obstacle, which he filmed last year for our benefit. You did a lot of post-production work after we showed it in the benefit,
Yes, we
but
did.
nevertheless, you had the basic film there. You had Danny Bolero in it. You had the property, and you've been shopping it to film festivals, and you've been getting into a few
We're
of them.
finalists in the Swedish International Film Festival, and we're a fourth finalist in the LA Film Awards.
Nice.
And I got 17 more to go.
Yeah.
That's great.
So we're
You're
here.
doing great work. I mean, I get a lot of BIPOC artists from the audition.
Yeah,
I hired 3 singers.
I remember.
Yeah.
Remember
For
last year.
music from a musical that I had written. But it's like, where do you go? And those like ground level conversations, I would find really useful.
So on a micro level, I care about what TRU can do. On a macro level, I think we're having a lot of interesting conversations about things that need to happen and things that think they are happening but aren't really happening. And
Uh-huh.
yes,
I would like to circle back to Tara specifically, because she's been doing so much work in the space on diversity. And for those of us who are often the only person of color in rooms that are trying to expand the vision, can you talk a little bit about that experience and also, quite frankly, the exhaustion that comes with that, being that, carrying that torch, and what self-care things that are needed in order to preserve for the long distance run that I know that you have been on, and Ron as well, because we are individuals, we are humans, we are artists. Can we talk a little bit about that as well, the psychology of that too?
Yeah, I mean, I don't think, from all of us here, I don't think there hasn't been a single one of us where we haven't been like the only one in the room in some way, shape, or form. I mean, I also hear like a lot of these conversations around like, young people in the room. I mean, I don't be telling people how old I am, but the answer is not old at all. Anyway, but the fact of the matter is that like, I still walk into spaces and it's the first time a Native person has ever been in it. I'm here in San Francisco because San Francisco Playhouse just produced their very first Native play ever, ever. And I was the very first Native director who's ever worked there. There are still theaters in 2023 having their first Native play, their first Native hire. And every time it's walking in and having to do the same spiel over and over again. If people would read the emails I send, I just send them a cultural sensitivity packet and like everything you need to know, Native 101, it'd be like, read this before day one, so I don't have to repeat myself, right? But again, this is not a unique experience that I have at all, but it is one where, the very first LORT Theater did its very first Native play ever in 2017. We're going on like 5 years of the greater American theater having anything to caring at all about Native people, which is still very new and very early. But meanwhile, I mean, again, just like every marginalized community have been doing theater since as long as the sun's been in the sky. All of our communities have been doing theater long before the Greeks figured it out. However, like that's not what people know. And so it's always coming in with this like ignorance, and I don't use ignorance with a negative connotation because I think it does, but it's just a simple matter of the fact is that people just don't know. And yeah, it's draining, like I'm sitting here, okay, y'all don't tell nobody, I know this is being recorded, but don't tell nobody, I don't know how old I am. Anyway, but like I'm sitting here at my ripe old age of 29 and have already considered like, do I want to leave the theater at this point? Like I'm already so burnt out. I'm already so tired. But every day I have Native artists younger than me, folks even older than me, reaching out saying, hey, thank you so much for doing this work. Thank you so much for, being on this conference, being on this panel, doing this stuff, being on these committees, so on and so forth. Because like, it's just having to have that amount of determination, like to move through what is like, frankly, like, I don't excuse my own language, but anyway, but it's really a shitty situation to be the only X in a room, or like having to have the same conversation over and over again with a well-meaning white person, or even a not well-meaning white person, is like, it's exhausting, and I say all the time, I'm a superhuman over here, but I say like, if I had 2% less determination, I would be a lawyer right now, because that's what my parents wanted in the first place. Like, that's what I'd be doing. Making money, working on travel sovereignty, that's what I'd be doing.
Right.
2%. Right. Anyway, so to say, so it's all like so dismal and bleak, well, because it is, but, for my own self, like self-care wise, the reason why I haven't quit, is frankly for the youth. Like I didn't know that Natives existed in the theater until I was 22 years old. And again, that was not that long ago. That was not that long ago. Anyway, and so I think about, these 7, 8, 9, 10-year-olds who I've had the great privilege of being able to teach and mentor, and, they knowing about all of these access into the arts, it's something that I never even fathomed could exist, is why I keep doing this. is for that next generation. And but also furthermore, like what helps replenish me, and especially y'all catch me right now at a very empty period, so I need some replenishing. Anyway, is being in community with my people, and with other people of color, like just having a great time, being unapologetic about who we are, why we do what we do, not having to answer questions about how our processes look different than like the Eurocentric model of theater, which is what we're all force-fed down our throats anyway. That's what like gives me rejuvenation and self-care, is like being in affinity unapologetically and without being like in a fishbowl of like being observed in affinity, if that makes sense. I mean, I think especially of like playwrights like Aisha Harris and What to Send Up When It Comes Down. And that was the most powerful piece of theater I've ever witnessed in my life. And that play, from the get-go, it said this was written for Black people, by Black people, this is for Black people. And if you are not a Black people, you're welcome for being here, but get the fuck out and shut up. And it was such a powerful experience. And I was like, that's the kind of work that I want to create. And I'm so thankful for being, invited in to here. As long as I sit here and do what I need to be doing, I know my place. Anyway. And just thinking of like, there's like, artists like Aisha Harris out there doing that kind of work, in the Native world, like there's artists like Madeline Sayed who's out there doing this one-woman show. It's touring all over the place, yes, I'm Maddie. Anyway, and like, there's just all of these artists who've been doing the work. And so, I hear about the pipeline issue. Nah, y'all, there are people who be doing this for a long, long time. It's just nobody's paying attention. Or folks are just thinking from like a very like settler colonial, like Western European perspective of how we create theater, and then dismissing all of these folks whenever people have been doing it and continue to. But I mean, in short, that was a very long, spewing of words. But in short, y'all, I'm fucking tired. And I'm the youngest person on this panel. Like, I'm not the youngest person in this room. Like, hello? Number one. And then number two, what gives me rejuvenation and hope is number one, the youth. And then number two, being in affinity. And so being in spaces like this, which, hopefully will fill up my cup just a little bit. So I can just keep going until the next time.
Well, thank you, Tara.
Thank you all for the work that you do in the space.
Ditto.
Are there any, does anybody have a question for anybody specifically on the panel or the panel in general? Scott?
Yeah, I saw a lot of great shows in the past year that were either by Black playwrights or had Black leads. And I noticed that different shows had different proportions of Blacks in the audience. And what I wonder is, and maybe some producers can speak to this, and Cheryl spoke to it a little bit. I guess one question is, what kinds of shows do you think Black audiences are looking for? I particularly noticed that between Riverside and Crazy had a lot of Black people in the audience. And I wondered maybe it was because it had a star in it. And how do you market to that audience?
Ron is probably in the best position.
That's a good question. And one of the challenges that I faced is, when I talk about reaching particularly African-American audiences, and I won't mention any names of companies, but I was talking about, okay, how do we reach out to Black people? I said, here's what I think. I said, we've got everything from Ebony. I said, we've got the Amsterdam News that's local, and I started talking about all of these other outlets of color. And they said to me, the problem is, Ron, we don't have metrics to determine if we use those outlets that they're successful. And so my response is, you know what, you didn't have that 30 years ago for white audiences either, but you somehow figured out how to actually measure and have metrics for how well advertising mailers are doing. So that just says to me that the work hasn't been done. And the work needs to be done if you're serious about providing a service where someone comes in and says, you know what, we really feel that an Asian community would really love to see K-pop. How can we reach them? And if they don't know how to reach them, then guess what? It's going to be the same thing that happens and so many times in so many other theaters. They put forth that even social media. Okay, I'm gonna try to keep this cool and calm and quick. Social media, speaking to audience, there is no one communication or verbiage that is going to speak to everyone. Something that resonates with Black people may not necessarily be the same thing that resonates with Latino community, which may not be the same thing that's going to resonate with white kids. You know, you have to know how to communicate to a diverse audience. And because the audience has been pretty much the same for years, the Broadway community is behind the 8 ball in changing and figuring out how do we actually reach these people so that we can get them to come into the theater? Because people like me are asking, I need young people. I need you to reach them. Tell me how you're going to do that. And if your answer is, well, you know, we're going to reach some influencers who, you know, are 20-year-olds and we're going to pay them to, you know, like retweet. No, that's not a strategy. That's an item on the list. I need the strategy. So I've gone too far afield once again, and I apologize because that can be very long.
You're right on topic.
You're in the field.
The second part of the question was, what do you think there are particular kinds of shows that
Of course. Of course. Okay, here's the thing. Myself, the most important thing is good story. If it doesn't have a good story, I don't care if it's about underrepresented communities, because I'm not trying to do stories about underrepresented communities that is trash. It needs to be a great story. You have to have your finger on the pulse of what is resonating with different diverse audiences to be able to determine how to speak to them, where to go to speak to them. You putting a full page ad in the New York Times with $60,000 is great, but Black people are not going to read that. If that's your goal to get Black people, you wasted your money. You need to be in radio. Okay, you will get more return if you're on the Black people still listen to the radio, right? So you have to be able to understand that the Black people, like all of us in this, we love to hear our own stories, but we also spend a lot of money and go see The Matrix. Every Marvel movie that comes out, Black and brown people are in that audience all the time. Every time. We make up a nice percentage of the people who are giving our money to those kinds of entertainment, right? So it's a matter, there's no right or wrong answer in terms of this is the message or this is the story that is going to appeal to this group. You have to be culturally connected to a group to be able to inquire what's in the zeitgeist in Native American, you know, communications. What's in the zeitgeist of what Asian communities are talking about, what they care about, what they love. And if you don't have a story that is about Asian communities, you need to figure out what is the story that may be still mainstream that appeals to Asian audiences. For example, I know as a filmmaker, you can do a horror movie that's awful, not spend a whole bunch of money in it, and make a shit ton of money in the opening weekend before people start talking and say this is trash. Because people love horror. That means you need to know what is selling. You have to be a marketer, you have to be a salesperson. What is selling today? Let's do that thing. And that's all I'm gonna say about that.
I mean, I can also tell y'all.
Yes.
Sorry.
And I also don't think that BIPOC audiences are a monolith either, right? So, I mean, I will speak to, I've seen about everything that's come on Broadway since the pandemic, except for one particular production that I sort of refused to see because I didn't like the marketing. And Ron, you probably know exactly what it is. Because there was something about this marketing that didn't speak to me and actually felt insulting to me as a Black person. And so as people of color, we vote with our dollars. So, you know, what may work for the other audience will not work for the BIPOC audience and how we want to see ourselves represented. And so again, I come back to this marketing and this chicken and egg about the audiences. It's not that the audiences don't have the purchasing power. They do, but they are very savvy as to what speaks to them. And we are not a monolith. And so probably the best answer to that is as universal as you can make, you know, for BIPOC centered, is probably the biggest bite that you will get at the apple. But knowing, even in language, even in copy, that's a skill to know how to do that. So these marketers need to hire consultants who know and take the advice that is being given to reach these audiences, which is a very sticky slope. They say they want the consultation, but sometimes they don't want to take it. And then we end up having these things of marketing that doesn't reach the audience that it's intended to.
And also what I'll finally say is, like, you know, for producers and folks like who have that decision-making power of which show, before you even get to the marketing and how do we reach these diverse audiences, my question always is why that show? Why is that the show that you want to produce and market? I'll give, you know, a very small anecdote. You know, as a Native person, again, we also not a monolith. You know, there's 570 plus federally recognized tribes. That's not including state recognized, unrecognized. There's so many. And even within our tribes, we'd be fighting all the time. But it's, what I can say all the time is that the Native plays that people want to produce, in my experience, have been ones that have been educational for non-Native audiences. You know who wants to see that? Not Natives. We don't want to see that. We don't want to see our trauma on stage. That's all we are. We don't want to see ourselves put in these relics of past, because that's all that the media is. You know what we want to see? We want to see something funny, because we're funny people. We want to have a good time. Where's our trash, fluffy musicals? I want one. Anyway, oh, I really do. I'm working on not a trash musical, but once that one goes and is good, I'm gonna write a trash musical. I can't wait. It's gonna be so bad and it's gonna be so good. Anyway, but so to say is why are you picking that particular show? And if the reason why you're picking a particular show from a particular marginalized background is, oh, I want to raise awareness around this issue that's really important, great. You're not going to rate, like, people who know about that issue are the people who experience it. So they're not going to come buy a ticket, you know? I'm not going to come buy a ticket to some big white theater doing a show about missing and murdered Indigenous women, girls, and Two-Spirit folks, because I live it. I don't need to go be educated about it. I don't need to be raised awareness about it. So if that's why you're doing it, that's going to be the audience you're going to get or not get. You know, if you just want to tell a great story and that great story just so happens to have Native people in it, hell yeah, buckle up, I'm going to be there. But yeah, it comes down to that same question of why that play, for what purpose, and then cross-referencing that with your audience of like, okay, if it is to raise awareness about how, you know, police kill unarmed Black men all the time, no. Like, we don't want to go see that. Like, folks are like, yeah, we live it, you know? If it's like, oh, this places that we want to talk about, like the increase in hate crimes against Asian communities since COVID. Folks have been living it, you know? Oh, if this is about, you know, XYZ, so on and so forth. If it's about raising awareness that marginalized experience, folks who live it may not want to see it. Some folks might, great. Some folks might not. You know, so I like to get down to even that before we even get to this marketing conversation of audiences, because it's important, and I don't hear people talking about it.
More trauma porn.
Yeah.
Trauma porn.
Yeah,
More.
yeah.
No more.
I'm going to ask, Wild, before we lose any more people, if you have thoughts of things that we at TRU can do to help or push the conversation forward, please put them in the chat. Because one of the things that our committee wants to do is we want to be able to look at stuff and say like, oh, here is a great thought. Let us see if we can do a program about it. Maybe we can reach out to somebody to talk about it. What is it that we can, what services can we provide? How can we help? So please write it down.
On that trauma porn.
Yeah, on trauma porn, I'm sorry. Yep.
Right, actually, a lot of the, you know, I worked at a arts presenting organization here that shall remain nameless. that is their stock and trade is basically doing with anything that deals with shows of color, all trauma porn, right? Because it's like, it's basically they're saying, isn't it great that we're not those Black and brown people in there? basically what they're unconsciously saying.
So many of the narratives you see, like, Black History Month, like, okay, slaves, civil rights, that's it. These are our narratives, and they're not all of them a narrative.
But that would be like I'm somehow teaching arts organizations that are PWIs, like how not to choose trauma porn, or like how to like look at their own unconscious biases in what they're picking, so that they don't always keep picking the shows with all of us getting killed in it.
Where's my deputy chief diversity officer? They all need to take an implicit bias training course to truly know where the macro and micro aggressions are, and also how to do micro and macro affirmations. I mean, that made it very fluffy, but I mean, it's just this, it goes back to what Tara was saying with the ignorance, right? They're just like unaware that they're even doing that. I think they think they're helping.
The people who most need it will not be the ones who take it.
Exactly.
Well, it's what they say about good intentions.
About those organizations will fall away and die. I mean, as far as I'm concerned, it's good riddance, right? You don't need any more organizations like that, you know.
Well, well, here we are.
On a lovely light note.
I do want to give everybody in the Zoom land there a chance to put the comments in the chat. Cheryl means that we mean it. We really want to.
Yes.
We want to be able. We hear these things. We get inspired by these conversations in the moment, and then we go, "What was it that we could have done?" And make this worthwhile.
This is a way to move it forward, as opposed to just everybody sit in the room and say, "This is what's bothering me. Why can't anybody do this?" Like, let's write it down, so then we can go back, figure out, okay, how do we have a seminar on how do you find marketers of color or whatever, and you just try to figure out what it is that we can do.
It was interesting to me that one of the things that kept jumping out a couple of times was the fact that it's not just the producers. I always thought that the answer was producers of color, but you're saying that people have to understand the marketing too, and they have to understand the communities. So that's a very good piece of information for me to take forward personally. Does anybody else have any other comments before we wrap this up? Because some of us have to get dinner.
I just want to just say, I think this idea of subject matter expert in these fields would be a benefit. Like whether it's a demographic researcher, because even these demographics in New York City, 8.1 million, that has shifted in evening. But somebody who has that knowledge, and then awareness of like, what is the actual, I would like to know at the end of this season, Ron, I'm giving you homework. I'm curious to know what the demographics of ticket buyers are at the end of this season, in June. And then comparing that to like the last couple of, I don't know if you can even add COVID year, but prior, if it's not that 55 to 70 year white woman, who's buying the tickets now?
I think that's a very valuable information to learn. Absolutely. You know, I've done some shows that I've been involved in and some that I'm not. I've met so many young African Americans whose first experience in theater, not just Broadway, in theater, was coming to a Broadway show because they were compelled by the story, right? And for me, that's very exciting because that's what I want. That's what we need as an industry. We need younger, different blood.
My first experiences with theater were on buses being brought from my school or my Girl Scouts or whatever. So essentially, like, how do people get introduced to this, and how do you market to those groups?
That's right. That's right. That's why I always go dialing for dollars for my shows, because I want people to, particularly foundations, to buy out the theater so that we can give those tickets to kids who otherwise would not have seen a Broadway show, right? Because once you're introduced to a Broadway show, then you can start appreciating it. And I remember telling one kid who I was talking to after the show, he was just effusive about how wonderful it is. It's like, oh my God, I didn't know Broadway was like this. And I had to say, well, great, I'm glad you enjoyed the show. I completely agree with you, but no, this is not the typical show, okay? This is a special thing that you saw tonight, right? So you have to look and research what you might want to go see to see if that's something that you feel you would respond to. Because everything is not great on Broadway. We know that.
Ron, that's so true. My first encounter with Broadway as a little child was The Wiz. So you understand like what, what having a seed planted like that and then looking around, I'm like, oh, this is not the norm. But that feeling that I got in The Wiz that day, I knew that at some point I wanted to be part of that community and somehow in that seed being planted. And this is sort of a full circle moment that I got to be part of that community is through Ron. And it can happen.
With a Broadway show was Flower Drum Song.
Could I ask, it's Judy, could I ask a question?
Sure, yes.
Okay, I would like to see this evening was about basically producing and art, how to make things happen like that. But getting the show on. I would like to see if TRU could have a panel of people of employers, producers, or general managers, and designers, stage managers, that sort of thing, on what they can do to get BIPOC people hired.
Did you put it in the chat? Because we're going to consider all of these ideas.
I'm trying to do it and I couldn't phrase it right. So anyway.
Okay, so
well, we recorded it, so that we've still got that.
Yeah, we got it.
Thanks. Yeah.
So I think we've talked about a lot. I think we've achieved a lot of what we wanted to achieve tonight. I think we got people
opening
to
a
talk
door.
about. We opened the door. We heard things that were interesting. Some of the things that were not easy to hear as the white man up here, but important for us to hear them and to consider them and to think about them. I hope that we can continue these conversations.
Yeah.
We're doing town halls at least a year, so specifically about diversity and inclusion. So I hope everybody will continue to support us in that. Janel, Tara, you are so great.
Follow you on Twitter, by the way.
If only you would come out of your, if only you would come out of your shell, Tara. Always a pleasure to see you. Thank you for supporting. Thank you for being a supporter of TRU. Ron, so grateful. So much great information. You were so wise, and appreciate it very much. Ariel, Malini, it was
always
great. You're becoming my regulars,
Yeah.
Thank you. Well, I will keep asking you back, and Cheryl, thank you so much for sharing the load. With me. I know that I'm always stepping in dangerous territory, and I thank you all for being patient with all of us and being so gracious and so generous with your information and your experiences and your feelings. Feelings, these conversations can't be had without allowing feelings to be expressed, because it's a very, very frustrating situation. Guys, thank you all for being here.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yay.
Thank you so much.
And thank you to Polaris North Theater, and to Leslie and to Rosemary Brandwine, who are our hosts here and give us the space to do this. Also curious to get feedback on whether the hybrid is working for you, and if you have any other ideas to make the hybrid even better or more inclusive. Okay, so That's it, guys.
Yeah,
Thank you, everybody.
Bye, thank
So much. Take care.
Thanks, everybody.
All right.
Thank you, guys. Like dozens and dozens of people in the audience here.